Hey everyone, very nice to be talking with you today.
Industry is very excited about agents, but I don't see a consistent standard definition for agents.
Agents are LLMs that can actually perform actions and decide on how to go about things on their own.
1.5 years ago, there was no concept of an agent. So when you started CrewAI, what was that one line of vision that you had? A week ago, you also made some announcements like partnership with IBM.
There is an interesting perspective in there that we're exploring with a few players.
I'm curious, what are the differences between the open source flavor and the enterprise flavor? I have a very special guest today, Joao Moura. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the encounter. I have a very special guest today, Joao Moura, the CEO of CrewAI. Joao, very excited to have you on my show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And hey everyone, very nice to be talking with you today.
So Joe, let me start by saying I'm a huge fan of CrewAI, as I've been using it for about 9 months to a year now. It's currently trending at, I think, 28 point something stars on GitHub, 28.8K or something, which is fantastic. So let me start by asking this question. You know, the industry is very excited about agents, but I don't see a consistent standard definition for agents. So as the CEO of one of the leading agentic platforms, what is an AI agent according to you?
I love that. Yes, it's funny because you see all these companies and people talking about agents, and then you jump in some calls with customers, and people are like, "Oh, so what is an agent? How you go about it?" For me, the most clear definition is around agency, right? So agents are LLMs that can actually perform actions and decide on how to go about things on their own. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can wrap these things around, and there's a bunch of layers of added complexity on top of it between caching, guardrails, and everything. But at the end of the day, it's all about agency. It's the ability for these agents to take decision and to go out and do things on their own.
Cool. So are you saying the collection of agents are like an agency where there are individuals that are collaborating together to accomplish a task? Is that how you basically define an agent?
Yes, I would say an agent is exactly it's something that is trying to accomplish a task. So it's usually a wrapper around a model or something, and we could get technical, but the idea here is a piece of software that can autonomously take decisions and take actions in order to accomplish a goal.
Cool. So Joe, 1.5 years ago, there was no concept of an agent. People were excited about just the LLM, the chatbot, and maybe an AI assistant. So when you started CrewAI, what was that one line of vision that you had? What was the vision that you had to build something like CrewAI?
I gotta say, funny enough, I was first a user before the creator. I was trying to build some of these agents myself, and I built a group of like 4 agents that were working together, and it worked so well that I was blown away. I was able to do things that like I would never do them before because it would take like too much time, and now I was able to do like 3, 4 times a week because I have these agents doing some of the work. So for me, it was kind of like a natural progression that I was like, all right, now I want to create more agents. I want to automate my life away, and that's kind of like how I start to build Crew, because what I was trying to get is if I want to create more agents, I need to have an easy way to do that. Like it can be a struggle every time. So how do I go about making this so easy that I can create new agents for different use cases and just keep automating things? And that's how CrewAI got to be built. But my first use case was actually around content creation. I was trying to get these agents to help me post more often on LinkedIn and help me from simple ideas getting to something that would be worth sharing.
Cool. So a lot of agents actually started with content generation, content aggregation, summarization. So while agents are still being used for that, the multimodal AI has been picking up momentum, and I actually see that the agentic environments haven't been able to keep up the pace with the evolution of the multimodal AI and some of the recent things like Anthropic adding the computer use tool. So, do you think there is a gap between agents still depending on LLM and not being able to leverage multimodal capabilities?
I don't think so. I think if you want to build agents that like leverage multi-model capabilities, you can definitely do it. I think the problem is, it's not the problem, but I think the circumstances are that there's so much room to explore with test alone. There's so many use cases, right? It unlocks so many things that everyone that is building agents is facing a choice. Like, do I add all new features that come up, or do I try to basically own all these different use cases that are already possible, and how do I expand within this before moving into something else, right? Because there's so much that you can do. And I also think there's a disconnect between a consumer use cases, things like browse the web for me, buy me food, get me tickets, and enterprise use cases, where a lot of the features that you need in the enterprise are sometimes not even AI, right? We're talking about security, infrastructure, user experience, and everything that goes around that. So I like to joke that that is like a this last mile that brings like LLMs to real world with agents in these companies. It was way longer than one last mile.
Right. So coming back to agents, the ability to leverage, for example, vision, multimodal. Even if you take CrewAI today, if I want to, for example, convert an image into a description or make an agent extract structured output from a PDF, I have to use the visual tool from the CrewAI arsenal, right? So it is still not native. For example, I cannot use the goal and the backstory of an agent and ask it to basically explain an image or process a PDF. That is still not there.
Yes, 100%. It's still not there. A lot of these use cases we're seeing people use the vision tool and bringing this like vision capabilities through APIs. So your agents are actually send this image externally so that it gets processed by a model or something, and then you get this information back, and your agents can do something with that. So yes, it's not native supported yet, and I don't know if there's other agent frameworks that do that. Probably are, but I think I think it's going to come a time where we're going to be able to expand to that. Right now, it's honestly, it's like what you said. There's so much going on that you're like, do I keep up with like this all different new features, or do I serve all these different use cases that already need me and they're actually in production? So there's a lot going on in there. I think eventually agents are going to go multimodal. There's just no way around it, right? So it's kind of like inevitable that we're going to get there. I think it's more is more a byproduct of how fast the market will move and start requiring that.
Right. So, if you look at the current agentic evolution and the landscape, it reminds me of the enterprise application integration of mid 2000, when there were these disparate systems like CRP, CRM, ERP, and homegrown business applications, and they were not talking the same language. So we had to put something like an IBM WebSphere or a BA WebLogic or a TIPCO server, and then make them all talk to each other and translate the formats and so on. For me, agents is like the modern AI driven enterprise application integration, because these agents will eventually have to talk to multiple endpoints and multiple applications. So do you see like a similarity between the EAI and the systems of agents that is evolving?
1,000%. So we're seeing like integrations is just like what unlock a lot of values for these agents. And especially when you go to the enterprise level, it's all about tapping into that data that is deep into an SAP or deep into a Salesforce. So you got to be able to integrate your agents to talk to your systems. And sometimes the systems are well-known systems like SAP and Salesforce, but other times they're, as you said, homegrown. So It's funny because again, it's a technology that is built on the back of a lot of other techs that has existed before. So APIs have been the way that you're being able to connect these agents. What I find super interesting is that there's going to come a time where you want to have these agents talk to one another, and not only within on platform, right? So Salesforce are doing their agents. There are going to be companies using that. Microsoft is doing copilots. There are going to be companies using that. And other companies are using CrewAI, and there are going to be companies using that. So how you get all those agents to be able to talk to themselves as well. And I think that's going to be a very interesting challenge to kind of like to tackle.
Right, right. So, talking about the market landscape, there are other frameworks. For example, there is AutoGen, there is AutoGPT. There are almost new frameworks coming up almost every day. On a weekly basis, I'm seeing new agentic platforms evolve. What sets CrewAI apart? How do you differentiate CrewAI from rest of the agentic platforms?
I love that. Yeah. So I think like the markets. This is my take on it. I'm gonna give you my scoop on this. Uh, AI agents are inevitable. Like the value proposition is too high for it not to happen. And there's a bunch of incentives that are kind of like aligning on this. So it's clearly a new industry and there's potential to be a market within the billions, many. So there's definitely going to be many players. Like no one's going to let one player take it all. But if anything, that's what makes this very interesting and attract all these players, either old or new. I think where CrewAI sets apart is even though AI agents are inevitable, for them to happen and when they will happen, there needs to be at least four boxes that people need to check. One of them is whatever the version of the AI agents that take over, it needs to be enterprise ready. Otherwise, companies won't use. And that goes back to everything that I said. And CrewAI does that. The other thing is it needs to be universal. So yes, OpenAI is going to launch its own thing. Google is going to launch its own thing, but you don't want to be boxed in into Gemini and OpenAI. You want to be able to switch models as new models come up. So there's an element of being universal that I think it's also mandatory here. The third one is needs to support complexity, especially when you're talking about automations. Automations is always going to be a consultative model because it's very specific and tailor made for like each company. And then the fourth one, and I think CrewAI really shines on this one, is it needs to be simple and fast because the market's moving so fast that companies cannot afford the missing out on the opportunity of spending too much time into one single thing to then figure out work. So it needs to be extremely fast for you to prototype, throw things in the wall, finds what works, and double down on that. So I think CrewAI, probably from every framework that is out there, is the only one that I think checks all those boxes in the way that it does. So it's enterprise ready. We have an enterprise product. You can self-host it. There's all the security layers and everything that come with that. It is the fastest and easiest. Anyone's going to tell you that. So that's kind of thing that kind of and I think that people really like it. It is universal and support complex cases. So I think that's kind of like what set us apart, at least on the enterprise, on the B2B layer. I think on the B2C, you have a few other players that are very competitive.
Absolutely. Completely agree with you on those four checkboxes. Now, let me ask you this. You have been collaborating with deeplearning.ai and Andrew Ng for a while. You did two courses. But beyond that, how did you convince Andrew to invest in your company? Tell us about that.
I gotta say, I'm so humbled by this because if anything, Andrew is the person that got exposed to everything, right? He made courses with everyone, so he knows all these companies, he knows all these products. So the fact that he chose to invest on us is very humbling for me. So honestly, a lot of the work that was the product. So when deep learning AI reached out to me and said like, hey, let's do a course together, and I went to their office and I met their people, I learned that Andrew was actually using it himself. He actually set up, they did an offsite, and he set up everyone's computers with CrewAI using Docker. And he was like, all right, now today everyone's going to build AI agents. So they got the whole marketing team to build AI agents using CrewAI, and he really liked it. He was like, all right, there's something in here. So in the process of recording the course, we got to chat, spend time together, talk about the business, talking about options. And he helped me a lot from only conversation and giving me ideas and ways that things could go. And then from there, we invited him to become a partner and to actually join the cap table. And we are very pleased to have him as an investor now.
Amazing. And a week ago, you also made some interesting announcements like partnership with IBM. So tell us about the recent announcements and the enhancements to the product.
Yes. So honestly, IBM is kind of like it's such an interesting player for us to partner with, because if you look at like the road to LLMs, right? IBM is probably one of the most OG kind of like companies, right? They have been doing Watson for like so many years. And I remember still using them back like in the MBA and other things, like people are like already using them. And honestly, I think it made sense. They are seeing the market moving, and we're talking with many players, especially like in the consulting business. But I think IBM is probably like the eagers to do something, and they were already using Crew, and they're like, hey, this is great. We like this. We are using this internally. We really dig it. Can we do something together? So we have been talking about a few different things. The initial partnership was more around closing things with the Watson API. So you can seamlessly use Watson endpoints and the new Granite models with CrewAI, not only open source, but also enterprise. But then there's a second layer on that is like how we can explore go to market and what that would look like. So I think there's an interesting perspective in there that we're exploring with a few players.
Awesome. Now, let me ask you another interesting question, which is very common to all the founders of open source driven companies. So you have, the open source flavor of CrewAI, which is extremely popular, and it is trending on GitHub. And then recently you launched CrewAI Enterprise, which has a specific price point. So how do you plan to balance between contributing to the open source community driven CrewAI project and make money and monetize the enterprise edition of CrewAI? How do you see that as a balancing act?
I gotta say, I got a lot of questions around that, especially on the investing side of things. And for me, it's a very straightforward thing. Maybe it's because I have done many open source projects throughout the years, and I had a few successful ones. And open source for me is such like second nature, and like I really find it's a very interesting way to give back, a very interesting way to work with amazing people, and it also brings a lot of business advantages. So I look at open source as being like a main asset for CrewAI as a company, because a lot of the people that we hire came from open source. So it's a great source of like of candidates. Then a lot of the companies that we closed and we are working with came in from open source usage. So it's an amazing distribution channel. And the way that I look at it is like CrewAI open source is an engine, like the car engine. And you have people putting miles and miles and miles into it, and it works. It's the best engine out there. And now what we're doing with enterprise is building the car. So if you want an engine, go and use the engine. If you want to use the car, go and use the car. But the car comes with a price tag. And the way that I think about it is less of like a kind of like a buy model approach, where it's either open source or not. I think there's a spectrum in here where you can say, well, I'm not going to open source something, but I'm going to make it free. So it's free to use. Or I'm going to make it very cheap. So you have like a spectrum of things that you can do. And honestly, if anything, I find that interesting because it adds one extra layer to the business, one extra lever that you can use. And if anything, allows you to get more integrated a little bit with some of the ways that you run the business.
So as a user and as a developer who consumes CrewAI open source, I'm curious, what are the differences between the open source flavor and the enterprise flavor?
Yeah. So one thing that we notice as we start deploying AI agents ourselves and for our customers is that there's at least 5 things that you want to do when you're building these agents. You want to plan them. So there's a process of discovery, ideation, use cases. Then you want to build them. And that's where like CrewAI really shines the open source. You can build them very fast, very easily. And then there's a process of deploying that can be sometimes a pain for certain people because you need to set up servers, you need to transform these agents into an API of sorts. So there's that. And then you have like a process of monitoring and iterating, and those also have their challenges because you don't want to monitor only prompts and traces. You want to monitor quality. You want to monitor execution, caching, tools. So there's extra layers of monitoring in here. So what we realize is like, hey, the open source is great for planning and building. We have free resources for you to plan, and we have the framework for you to build. But what we could do if we actually charge it for this, can we make planning easier? Can we make building easier? And can we go into deployment, monitoring, and iterating? And that's where you get like what you get from CrewAI Enterprise. So on Enterprise, you have Crew Studio where you can build with no code. You have templates where you can plan your use cases better. CrewAI Enterprise is a consultative like product, so it involves having a forward deployed engineer from our team helping you from ideation all the way to implementation, and that is very important. And you also get to deploy these agents with us to self-host them if you want to, monitor everything, set up alerts, test different models, and anything in between. So it's a way more complete product on that way, on that sense.
Perfect. So with so much going on within the ecosystem and a lot of discussions around around agents, are you seeing like real implementation and agents running in production? Can you call out an example where you are seeing this in production?
Yes. So there's a lot that we can't tell because NDAs, that's kind of like a byproduct of doing business with enterprise. It's interesting because we're noticing that a lot of companies are moving way faster than what we expected. We thought 2024 was kind of like the year of prototypes and POCs. But what we are seeing is people going into production and like cases being deployed every week. So and the funny thing is, these companies are almost like, don't tell anyone. Like, don't tell anyone that they're using this. Like, they're being very secretive about it. They don't want people to copy it or anything. But there's a few cases that are public that we can share. One is on our latest course with Deep Learning AI and Andrew. We actually flew in the commercial CTO of Gen AI from PwC. And PwC is actually heavily using CrewAI in production environments, and it's very exciting to see some of the things they're saying. Amazing savings that they're getting from running this, and that has been very interesting. We're also working with companies in telecom, specifically around legal cases, major consumer brands as well, specifically around logistics and some internal processes. So it's a very interesting market because there's so many verticals and horizontals for you to explore. But PwC would probably be the one that we can call out, and we have a public video with them talking about how they're using CrewAI in production.
Awesome. And Joe, one of the critical decisions that you made was to leverage the tooling ecosystem provided by LangChain and LlamaIndex. As a developer, I find it very interesting and very powerful because I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I can basically borrow from LangChain or LlamaIndex and make my agents use any of those tools. While I'm seeing rest of the agentic platforms are going after building their own tool chain, toolkits, and trying to assemble the same thing. So, what went into your design philosophy when you wanted to kind of inherit what LangChain and LlamaIndex built?
I gotta say, it was very much a business strategy, right? If you think about it, like integrations, as we said before, are key to allow these companies to actually extract value from agents. And integrations are inherently hard to build because you can build an integration pretty easily and fast, but maintaining it is the tricky part. Things changes, API changes, versions got updated, security happens, and you need to upgrade other things. So it can be very taxing for a company, especially on the early days, to maintain a lot of these integrations. And because we had like some early movers like LangChain and LlamaIndex that were building a lot of integrations, I was like, well, I see no reason for us to not use integrations that other people have built. I mean, we better take the savings and the money and the time, and we focus on what we do very well and how we provide value. And eventually we can build our own integrations as well. I think there are strategic integrations that you do want to own, especially depending on kind of like the players that you're working with. And there's a lot of like businesses that we are working with that they want to build their own internal integrations. So they have like completely control over that. But in order to allow, especially the open source community, to use CrewAI and build super fast, I think like that was the right move, and I regret nothing. If anything, I think I would do it all again.
Absolutely. the interesting fact is both LangChain and LlamaIndex have their own agent frameworks, but I find it much more intuitive to use their tooling with CrewAI than using, for example, LangGraph. So
Yeah,
as a, developers love that.
I gotta say yes. I honestly, I think there's so many things out there. There's so many tools out there, and if anything, that's great for the community. The community got options to choose from. I think what we try to do with CrewAI that I'm very proud of is this idea that at any day of the week, and I tell this to every engineer in the company, I would rather us take the complexity inside the company so that the users and consumers and like they don't need to take care of that. So I think that it really comes through when you actually use the library because you see like this is so easy. Like it's almost like borderline magical in some cases. But like, well, how does this actually works behind the scenes? And I think that comes through. It's a fine balance that you need to keep in there, but I think that level of abstraction kind of like unlocks a lot of people to move super fast. What I believe it's crucial for accelerating the adoption of AI agents.
Absolutely. We're almost at the end of this interview. So the last question is, as the visionary who created CrewAI and leading that bandwagon, how do you see the agentic workflows and the agentic platforms evolve? What's the roadmap for CrewAI in the next few months? I cannot even say few years because it's moving at a fast pace, but what is the roadmap for next few quarters?
Yes, there's so much going on. I think like for agents overall, I think we're going to see a rapid expansion in 2025, especially leaving some of the companies that are fast tracking. I think right now there's a lot of like conversation going on around AI agents. If you look close, most of the companies are early in this journey. So I would say that the takeoff is yet to come and probably is going to happen next year as companies starts to ramp up a lot of these usages. And the other thing that I find will accelerate this is how fast it is for you to get to value. Like if you compare with other breakthrough innovations in market from the past, like for example, the internet, people talk a lot about that. The internet was similar in a lot of ways, was a new industry, everyone's talking about it. But I find that one major difference is that back in the day, you being on the internet would not drive value on day zero, right? You're not going to get more customers. No one was in there. It was all about building for the future. But with AI agents, what we're seeing is kind of like you deploy AI agents in one quarter, and then the next quarter results shows. Like you see savings, you see revenue, and you can see on some of the public companies. I think Walmart, for example, was the one that like really like came true. And when they published the last reportings, and you see how much savings they're getting with AI in general. So I think we're going to see those things really accelerate next year. In terms of roadmap for CrewAI specifically, I think there's features that we need to get to. There are certain integrations and there are some business things that we need to get done. But if anything, I think now is about now it's about, I think, use cases, if anything, more than anything for us. So how do we unlock more use cases and get more people to come public around, like, this is what we're actually doing, and this is pretty good. I think that's kind of like that. Once that those things starts to come out, we're going to shake the trees, all right? And there's going to be a lot of people kind of looking more for opportunities like that.
Amazing. Well, I'll continue to be a fan of CrewAI. I'll continue to work on CrewAI. I want to thank you for putting that up as an open source project and empowering the community to build such powerful agents.
Thank
And
you,
with that, I
Johnny.
also thank you. With that, I also thank you for being on my show. Thanks a lot for taking time. And this discussion has been very, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much for having. Have a good one.